Hi everyone and welcome along. Today we're going to paint some loose watercolour lilacs. So grab your paints and let's get started. Okay, so we're going to put some lilacs in a vase, and what I like to do first is just plan where my stems are going, and then the sort of rough crossover point will be a nice sort of handy reference as to where they are going to sort of suddenly come and sit in the vase. So I think we'll go for that. So I've got this sort of spray of stems, and then I'm just going to draw in a little curve there, which is going to be the rim of the vase, but that's all we need our pencil for the moment, so we'll say goodbye to that, and I'm going to start mixing up some colours. So I do have this Cobalt Violet, which is a really great colour for lilacs. However, I think the best flowers are always done with a few different tones of colour. So I've woken that one up, but I'm also going to wake up my Cobalt Blue Deep just here, and my Permanent Rose. The hardest working colour in my palette, I think. And we're just going to mix up just an alternative purple colour. So get all your colours nicely woken up and ready to go. And if you don't have Cobalt Violet, because it's not the most common colour to have, certainly in a sort of ready-made palette, then why not play around with the blues and pinks in your palette and create some lovely different tones of the sort of bluey purple variety, and then you're good to go. So I'm going to begin painting with a size 2 brush, and this is going to be really nice, and they're quite loose, these flowers. Ooh, got a little hair lurking in there. They're going to be quite loose, and I'm going to sort of be playing around with the different tones that I've got in my palette as we paint just the one flower. So here we go. So we're going to start with this one here, and we're going to begin up at the top, and I'm going to just use the belly of my brush to start dabbing in some sort of splotches of colour. And what I'm doing is I'm allowing for little bits of unpainted space, but I'm also putting down colour and then cleaning off my brush and allowing the wetness of just a very diluted bit of very dilute water there to allow the colour to just spread down. And obviously we're going to get a bit of an overlap with some of these lilacs. So I'm just painting this one in full first, fully knowing that as we move down, some others might not all show up quite as much. So I'm just following my way down the stem, getting that sort of flowery cone shape. And then as we get towards the bottom, I'm sort of using my brush to create some slightly sort of larger brush strokes. And we'll leave it at that. Okay, so I'm now going to move over to this one, because this one is far enough away from the first one I've painted in, so there won't be too much of an overlap. Just remixing up some colour. It's amazing how much you get through. Okay, so if you want to turn the page, that can be quite helpful, just so you can get a sense of the direction you're going in, and make sure you sort of keep mixing up the purples you're putting in there. But I love lilacs, especially especially in watercolour, because you can see you can achieve the quite distinct flower shape with such simple loose brush strokes. I think the most important thing is to just make sure you leave some unpainted space. Now, I've allowed this one just a little bit of drying time, but it's still fairly wet, which is pretty cool. What I want now is some burnt sienna for the stem, because they have quite woody stems. Just waking that up there. And I'll get a little bit of Paynes Grey. To get a sort of slightly darker stem. And I'm going to use my really small 4/10 brush. Just for the moment, what I want to do is I want to find, it's a bit like how I paint my trees on Patreon when I teach tree painting. We're just looking for, in these little gaps, places to put little branches. And because we've allowed just a little bit of drying time, it means we get the perfect kind of blend, that the brown sort of does get a little bit of a bleed into the purple, but as long as we keep a light touch, it's not going to spread so far that it really sort of dominates and muddies down the lilacs. So what I recommend is paint 2 purple lilacs. Once you finish the second one, go back to the one you just painted and pop in the brown stems. Now, the other thing we need to think about is the leaves on a lilac branch. Now, I'm going to include some in my vase of lilacs, so I'm just mixing some sap green, and I've got a little bit of green gold because the leaves have got a nice little sort of warmth to them. And I'm going to use my size 2 brush. Even though a size 4 would be great, I just want to have lots of control because the leaves aren't so big, and I just want to make sure they don't sort of get in the way too much. So nice simple little leaves. And at this point, I'll just do that for the moment for this first branch. So you can see the more I sort of fill in things on this first lilac, the more it's going to impact the other flowers around it. So that's why we sort of go piece by piece with the first lilac, having painted in the second one. So let's pop in the start of the stem for this other one, because we've given it just a little bit of drying time. And you'll notice that I haven't gone below the rim of the jar there. Also, I'm using that pencil line stem that I drew at the very beginning as a handy little guide for drawing in my pencil, my branch here. Let's pop in a few leaves, maybe one's just drooping over the front. So although this is loose, this is still, I consider this to be in my sort of controlled loose style, where we still sort of make the most of the lovely crisp edges drying before we sort of add too much. I think we'll pop in a leaf there. And then get the stem colour. A bit more of that darker colour there. And there we go. Okay, so now I've got these 2 main ones in. I'm now going to sort of carefully fill in the ones that are just a little bit overlapped, that are more in the background. I've just got one more to paint in, and I thought it would be useful to just get you back for this bit because I am putting this one in just a little bit more of a diluted tone, and I can still pop in little bits of sort of slightly stronger colour, but on the whole it is further back, and a bit like this one you can see with the leaves here. It's just a helpful way to show just a little bit of perspective, a little bit of difference. Even with a really loose watercolour painting, there's no point in not trying to make things look as believable as possible. So I'm now going to pop in, because we're not going to see a huge amount of stem detail, so I'll just get a very loose, very dilute green for a little leaf there, and maybe one more there. Lovely. Now we do have this little bit here of completely clear unpainted space, so what I can do, especially because this area has dried quite nicely now, so we'll just pop in a little bit there that gives the impression of this lilac here just in the background. Right, now we've got our lilacs looking really beautiful. We now need to have a think about the vase itself and the vase of water. So this Paynes Grey is going to be very useful. If you don't have Paynes Grey, and I didn't for a long time in my palette, I'd opt to put Prussian Blue and burnt sienna together, and you get a very, very similar colour. A blue and brown mix, I mean obviously putting more and more blue in is going to get it closer to the Paynes Grey colour, but these colours together actually are both going to be extremely useful because Prussian Blue with burnt sienna makes an amazing kind of greeny grey, which I'm really keen on. So let's try that for our vase. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to begin by using my size 2 brush to just sweep some of that rather dilute burnt sienna Prussian Blue mix across the curve of the vase, and then put in a second. I'm just now sort of creating a sort of textured rim of the vase, so I'm doing a jar really. And now if you want to get your pencil and just give yourself a vague shape, you can do so, doing some curves down the side and then a curve across the bottom. And that's always handy. But I'm going to be combining very, very dilute colours with some much sort of stronger, more concentrated tones to really emphasise the light and dark of glass reflections. So let's begin by just using that burnt sienna Prussian Blue mix to get an outline, and then cleaning off the brush and just sort of using it to sort of come in, and then obviously the base of the vase. But now it's going to drop in some of that Paynes Grey. Sweep it across. So that's a really nice start, but of course we do have the water in the vase, so now I'm going to create a water line, again a sort of oval shape, and I'm really wanting to make the most of unpainted space. So the white unpainted bits are going to make all the difference here, because they're going to look like highlights of light reflection on the vase. So just try and keep it sort of fairly minimal, fairly fluid, I think. Now I'm just going to start sort of placing in the back of the vase rim. And then with a dilute version of the stems, I'm going to start to just paint in first the sort of the stem coming in and just before it hits the water. And I want to get the feeling that through that glass the stems are just a little bit sort of lighter and fainter because of the way in which light sort of floods in. But I also don't want to lose them entirely, so I'm just sort of building up the colour. So I'm mentally just picturing the stems coming in, and we've got one there. And now what's nice is, because this is still wet, shooting those stems down into the vase, suddenly getting a little bit of a blend. But as we know, when a stem hits the water, then it suddenly looks very distorted, the way that the light distorts how something looks through water. So I'm just going to sort of loosely paint in these stems, and I'm really happy with that actually. I don't think it needs an awful lot more. I think really with these paintings it's all about knowing when to stop, and that can be really hard because we just want to keep going and keep sort of tweaking this bit there and that bit there. But I will just pop in a few more lowlights on this vase. But I think that looks rather lovely. So the only thing left to do is let it dry 100% and rub out the pencil. So with my trusty kneadable eraser, I have managed to rub out all the pencil. A lot of people ask me, surely you can't rub out pencil after you've painted over the top in watercolour. Well, you can, it's just there are a few variables to consider. Painting nice and dilute, drawing your pencil nice and light, and having good kit. So I always use an HB pencil and a kneadable eraser, a really good sort of artist's eraser. And then what I love is once you've rubbed out pencil, then you can sort of see your picture more clearly. And I've just decided that actually it would be kind of fun just to add a few just low lights to the base of some of the flowers. So all I've done there is just mix up some slightly more concentrated versions of the colours I've been using, the Cobalt Blue Deep, Permanent Rose, and I just think that looks really cool. So don't overdo it, but those three in the foreground I think just look really fab with a little bit more. So there you go. Thanks so much for watching. I really hope you enjoyed that one. I want to say a massive thank you to my patrons for their support, because that support enables us to keep creating videos like these that everyone can enjoy. And if you enjoyed this one, then hit the like button below and comment to let me know how you're getting on. And if you subscribe and hit the little notification bell right next to it, then you'll never miss another video. Until next time, bye!